The evening sun was low over the wide fields, painting the sky in deep orange and gold. The wind carried the smell of dust and grain, and the sound of old farming drones hummed somewhere far away. John Marlowe, a farmer who had spent most of his life on this quiet colony world, wiped sweat from his forehead and leaned on his shovel. He had been fixing a stubborn section of fence all afternoon. It was a normal day, or it should have been. But as John looked across the rows of tall crops, he saw something move, something tall, slender, and not shaped like any human. The movement was quick, slipping between the stalks, too big to be an animal. His first thought was trouble. John reached for the plasma cutter resting against the fence post. It wasn't meant as a weapon, but it could cut through steel more than enough to scare off thieves or wild creatures. He stepped slowly toward the movement, keeping his boots light on the dry soil. The rows of crops whispered in the wind, but he could hear something else now. Breathing quick and shallow, a shadow shifted, and then the figure stepped into the open. It was a woman, or at least something shaped like one. She stood taller than John, her skin a pale silver blue. Her long arms ended in slender fingers with too many joints, and her large eyes, 4 of them, blinked in pairs. Her clothing was torn, dust-stained, and clung loosely to a frame that looked far too thin. John froze. Every story he'd heard about her kind came rushing back. Years ago, the frontier. Wars had pitted humans against many alien species, and some wounds never healed. He had seen soldiers return broken, heard about villages burned on distant planets, and the face in front of him belonged to one of the enemy. She raised her hands slowly, fingers spread. Her voice came low and rough, her words broken but clear enough. I will work your fields. Human, she said, pausing to take a shaky breath. Just feed my hungry children. John tightened his grip on the cutter. His mind screamed that this was a trap, that she was a spy. Yet her voice didn't sound like the voice of a soldier. It sounded tired, desperate, and close to breaking. Where are they? He asked, his voice flat. She tilted her head toward the tree line beyond the field. Slowly, 2 small shapes emerged. Both were thin and quiet. Their skin the same pale hue as hers, but their eyes too large for their small faces. They clung to each other, moving with a weak, uneven step. John's stomach twisted. He had seen hungry children before, human children, and these looked worse. He also knew the colony rules well. No alien refugees, no sheltering outsiders. The penalty was heavy, and suspicion alone could ruin a man's life here. You picked the wrong farm, John said. Though his voice lacked conviction, she lowered her hands. But her gaze stayed locked on his. No. Farm is wrong. If there is food, she whispered. John looked over his shoulder at his barn. The building was old, with enough shadows to hide 3 strangers for a night. His gut told him to send them away, to call the patrols, to wash his hands of whatever mess they were in. But another part of him, the quieter, more stubborn part, told him that once you turned away someone this desperate, you could never forget it. The wind shifted, and John noticed how thin her clothing was. The nights here were cold. The children were already shivering. One night, he said at last, that's all. A flicker passed over her face. Not quite a smile, but something lighter than the weight she carried. She nodded. One night she agreed. John led them toward the barn, keeping an eye on the horizon. No one else seemed to be around. The farming drones kept working, blind to the strange guests entering the property. Inside the barn, the air was heavy with the scent of hay and oil. He pointed to a corner behind stacked crates. You can sleep there, he said. Touch nothing. She guided the children to the spot, helping them sit on the hay. One of them coughed a dry, hollow sound and leaned into her side. She looked at John, her 4 eyes steady. You are not like other humans, she said quietly. John frowned. Don't be so sure. He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he heard her voice again, softer this time. Thank you. The word hung in the dusty air of the barn, and, for reasons he couldn't explain, John felt it settle heavy in his chest. The war was years behind them, but perhaps, he thought, not for everyone that night, as the moons rose over the fields. John sat at his kitchen table, staring out the window toward the barn. He told himself it was just one night, in the distance. He thought he saw a faint glow through the barn's cracks, too soft to be from a lantern, and too strange to be human light. He took another sip of coffee, not sure if he wanted to know what it meant. The morning came slow, with a pale sun climbing over the horizon. The fields glistened with dew, and the distant hum of farming drones drifted through the cool air. John Marlowe was already up, standing at his porch with a mug of black coffee. In hand, his eyes kept drifting toward the old barn. He told himself they would be gone today. That was the deal one night, nothing more. Yet a knot of unease sat heavy in his stomach. The barn door creaked open. Larea stepped out. The silver blue of her skin caught the sunlight in a strange way. Her clothes were still ragged, but she walked with a steady grace. Behind her, the two children followed, moving slower. One of them leaning against her leg, John watched them cross the yard. He didn't wave, didn't speak. Not yet. Larea stopped a few feet from him, lowering her head slightly, not quite a bow, but a gesture that spoke of old customs. You gave food, she said, her words still halting but clearer than last night. I left it in the barn, John replied, his voice flat. Figured you'd find it. The children stood close, their large eyes fixed on the mug in John's hand. It was not the coffee they wanted, it was the steam, the warmth they haven't eaten in 6 days, Larea said quietly. They are. Slower now, John shifted uncomfortably. 6 days. Even for humans, that was bad for her kind. He had no idea what it meant. You need more than scraps, he said. Almost without meaning to, her gaze lifted to meet his. Yes, he set down his mug. Colony rules say I can't shelter aliens. I know, she said simply. There was no anger in her voice, only fact. So what's your plan? John asked. Just walk from farm to farm, begging until someone turns you in. Her 4 eyes blinked in pairs. Work, she said. I can mend, I can repair machines. I can clear weeds faster than your drones, feed my children, and I will make your fields grow. The words were bold for someone asking for help. John almost laughed. Almost, but there was something in her tone that wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. As if she knew her worth, even with nothing to her name. He crossed his arms. And why should I trust you? Because if I wanted to harm you, you would be gone already, she said softly. That chilled him more than he cared to admit. Her eyes did not waver, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The smaller child sneezed, breaking the silence. Larea crouched down, pulling a thin strip of cloth from her belt to wipe the child's face. She whispered something in a language John didn't understand. The child made a faint clicking noise in reply. John had seen families before, human ones. But there was something sharper here, as if every second together was borrowed time. Finally, John sighed. If I give you work, you do it my way. Yes, she said, without hesitation. And if the patrols come, you hide. Yes. That was all they needed. It wasn't a handshake, but it was an agreement. John led them to the west fields where one of his irrigation lines had been. Giving him trouble for months? If you can fix that, we'll talk, he said. Larea studied the long metal pipe, her fingertips brushing along its surface. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, John thought she was just thinking. Then he heard it, a faint hum. Like the line itself was answering her touch, she opened her eyes, 3 breaks in the flow. She said, pointing to spots along the trench. One inside, one deep, one at your valve. John stared. He'd spent hours trying to find the leak. last season, and she had named the spots in seconds. You can talk to machines. He asked. I listened, she corrected. Then she went to work. Her movements were quick, efficient. She didn't use tools at first, just her hands. Sliding open panels as if she knew their design by heart. The children sat nearby, watching. They were too weak to run, too quiet to cause trouble. Every so often, Lorea would glance at them, her expression unreadable by midday. Water was running clean through the line again. The flow was stronger than it had been in years. John tested the valve himself, and sure enough, no leaks. You weren't lying, he said. I have never lied to you, she replied. John found himself at a crossroads. He could tell her to leave now. Claim the work was payment enough, but deep down, he knew he wouldn't. Not when those kids could barely stand. Not when she'd done more in an hour than he could in a day. All right? He said at last, you can stay for a while, work the fields. Earn your food, but if things go bad, you run. I understand, she said, that night. John sat at his table again, looking out at the barn. The faint glow was there once more, this time pulsing slowly. He didn't know if it was dangerous, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning of something much bigger. The night air was cold, the kind that crept under doors and settled in the bones. John Marlowe sat in his kitchen, the lights dim, a pot of stew cooling on the counter outside. The fields swayed gently under the pale moons. The barn stood silent, but not still. It started as a faint clicking, soft enough to be mistaken for an insect. But then the sound changed, rising and falling, like speech. John put down his spoon and listened. The noise wasn't coming from the wind. It was coming from inside the barn. He grabbed the old lantern from the shelf and stepped out into the yard. The frost crunched under his boots. The closer he got, the clearer the sounds became. It was not just clicking now. It was mixed with low, thrumming hums, deep enough to make the air feel heavy. John paused at the barn door. The glow he had seen the last 2 nights was stronger now, spilling faint blue light through the cracks. His hand hovered near the latch. Every part of him said he should turn back. It wasn't his business, but curiosity was a stubborn thing. He slid the door open just enough to look inside. Lorea knelt in the center of the barn. Her long fingers rested on the dirt floor, tracing strange patterns in the dust around her. The children sat cross-legged, their eyes closed. The soft glow came from their skin, pulsing in rhythm with the sounds they made. It didn't feel random. It felt like a song. John stepped in, the lantern casting a warm circle of light. The hums and clicks stopped instantly. The glow dimmed. Lorea's head turned sharply, her 4 eyes locking on him. You should not be here, she said, her voice sharper than before. John set the lantern on a crate. I own the place. You own the walls, she said quietly. Not what happens inside, he frowned. You want to explain what I just saw? Her gaze softened, but only slightly. This is how my children. Remember home? That didn't sound like a lullaby. John replied, that sounded like you were talking to something. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at her children, whispering in her language. They shuffled back into the shadows, their glow fading completely. Finally, she faced him again. You have machines that talk to each other in the air, she said. We have voices that travel farther than your machines can hear. John crossed his arms. Who are you talking to? Lorea hesitated. No one who will come here, she said. Not yet. Not yet. John repeated, that's supposed to make me feel better? She stood slowly, her movements fluid, controlled. I promised you work for food, nothing more. Nothing less, but if I do not teach them our songs, they will forget what they are. John looked at the patterns she'd drawn in the dirt. They weren't random marks. They formed loops, spirals, and shapes that made his eyes ache if he Stared too long. Those drawings, he said. What do they mean? They are memories, Larea answered simply. Memories we cannot carry in our heads alone. John wasn't sure if she was telling him the truth or giving him the kind of answer meant to end a conversation. Either way, he didn't like. It's fine, he said. But if I hear you talking to no one again, you tell me before I find out myself. Larea inclined her head. Agreed. But her tone told him it wasn't much of a promise. The next morning, the air was heavy with mist. John walked out to the west fields, expecting to see Larea at work instead. He found the irrigation drones moving in perfect sequence. Every valve checked, every line flowing like new. She was crouched at the far end of the field, her hands inside a damaged harvester unit. How'd you get that thing running? He asked. It was not broken, she said. It was confused. Machines don't get confused. John said, yours do, she replied, without looking up. The way she said it made his skin prickle. That night, the sounds came again, softer. This time, John told himself not to get up, not to spy, but he sat awake, listening. The hums rose and fell. The clicks quickened, and under it all, he thought he heard something else, a faint metallic echo. Like the sound of a transmitter catching a signal when it stopped. The silence felt heavier than the noise had been. John lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had let an alien, mother and her children, into his barn for one night. Now it was 3 nights. And each one brought more questions. He didn't know if she was running from something, hiding from something, or calling it closer. And worst of all, he wasn't sure which of those scared him more. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the sound came, a deep, steady rumble that didn't belong to any farming machine. John Marlowe stood at the edge of the field, the morning mist curling around his boots. He knew that sound. It was the low hum of a patrol ship. It wasn't passing overhead, it was coming in to land. His eyes went straight to the barn, inside. Larea and her children were finishing their small morning meal, bread. A few boiled roots, nothing more. The youngest was curled close to her side, still too weak to move quickly. John stepped in, his voice low but sharp. Patrol's here, Larias. Head snapped toward him, all 4 eyes narrowing. Looking for us. Looking for anything, John replied. And if they find you, it's trouble for all of us. She gathered the children instantly. No wasted motion. Her hands moved like she'd done this before, wrapping them in an old blanket, tucking their faces against her body. There's a space under the grain bins in the far corner. John said, get in and don't make a sound. She didn't question him. She simply moved, fast and silent, in seconds. The 3 of them were hidden. John slid the wooden panel into place, scattering loose hay across it. The rumble of engines cut out as the patrol ship touched down just beyond the fence. Boots hit the dirt, and the clink of armor plates carried through the crisp air. John walked out to meet them, keeping his face calm. 2 soldiers approached, one tall and lean, the other broad with a hard set to his jaw. Their armor bore the blue crest of the colony guard, rifles slung casually but ready. Marlowe, the tall one, said, "You seen anything unusual?" "Depends on what you call unusual," John said evenly. "The irrigation's finally working right. That's unusual." The broad soldier didn't smile. His eyes swept over the barn. "We've got reports of alien movement near the south." "Ridge, that's 10 clicks from here," John replied. "You think I've got a ridge hiding out in my barn?" The tall soldier chuckled faintly, but the broad one didn't. He nodded toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look?" John's jaw tightened. "You think I'm hiding something?" "It's protocol," the soldier said flatly. Already stepping toward the doors, John moved with him, keeping just close enough to block his direct line of sight into the shadows. "You'll spook my drones, and I'll be the one reprogramming them all week. The soldier didn't care. He pulled the door open and peered inside. His gaze swept over the hay, the tools, the crates, lingering just a little too long on the far corner where Lorea and the children were hidden. John's stomach tightened, but he kept his face bored. See anything worth writing up? The soldier stared another moment, then stepped back. No, he said. But if you do see anything, anyone, you call us first. You know the rules. Sure, John said. I know the rules. They left as quickly as they'd come. The ship lifting into the sky until its shadow faded from the fields. Only when the sound was gone did John go back to the barn. He slid the panel aside. Lorea and the children emerged. Silent but tense. You've done that before? He said quietly, hiding like that. Her eyes met his, more times than I can count. John studied her face, trying to read the truth there. You said they were looking for anyone. Human or alien, they're looking for us, she said simply, but they are not the only hunters. Something in her voice made the back of his neck prickle. Who else? Her gaze drifted toward the horizon. My own kind, she said. They are closer than you think. John didn't like the way she said it. Not as a warning, but as a fact, already decided that night. The fields were silent again. But John didn't sleep. He sat at the table, turning her words over in his mind. Somewhere beyond the hills, the patrol ship would be moving on to its next sweep, and somewhere else, maybe much closer, another kind of ship might be hunting too, he thought. Of the glow in the barn, the strange hum in the night, the patterns in the dirt. If she really was hiding from both sides, then keeping her here wasn't just breaking the colony rules. 'Twas inviting trouble right to his doorstep. And yet, when he looked toward the barn, a dim light flickered once more, and he stayed where he was, telling himself he'd deal with it tomorrow. It was near sunset when John Marlowe heard it, a sound that didn't belong to this quiet land, a sharp crack in the sky followed by a deep roar that rattled the windows. He stepped out onto the porch, scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing but the fading gold of the fields. Then a streak of fire cut across the clouds. Burning bright against the darkening blue, it moved fast, trailing black smoke. And then, with a shudder that seemed to shake the ground, it slammed into the far edge of the valley. The air carried a faint metallic shriek, not like any human craft he knew. From the barn, Lorea appeared. Her children close behind, her 4 eyes were wide, fixed on the burning trail in the distance. That's not patrol, John said. Reading the fear in her face, no, she whispered. It's worse. John waited, but she didn't explain. Instead, she grabbed her children and pulled them toward the shadows of the barn. What is it? He pressed. She turned to him. Her voice sharp and urgent, a harvester drone. The words meant nothing to him. That's supposed to scare me. It should, she said. It hunts my kind. It hunts escapees. It scans for our heat, our movement, our voices. Once it finds us, it calls the fleet. John's stomach tightened. And where does that leave me? If it scans your farm, Lorea said, it will send your location, your records, your trade routes. To my people, they will not care that you are human. John cursed under his breath. He knew the valley was open land. The drone could sweep the area in hours. How? Long before it's here, he asked. By morning, Lorea replied without hesitation. Maybe sooner if it moves fast. She began to gather what little she had. A blanket, a small pouch, the thin strips of food left from their last meal. The children clung to her legs, their eyes darting nervously to the glowing clouds in the distance. You planning to run? John asked. Yes, she said. We can hide in the old canyons, but the patrols may follow. They will not understand the difference between a refugee and a scout. John rubbed a hand across his face. And you expect me to just let you go? Walk into trouble that might circle right back here? She looked at him for a long moment. If we stay, we bring trouble here faster. Something in her tone told him this wasn't just fear, it was experience. She had been hunted before. The sun dipped below the hills, and the first stars blinked. Into view, the glow from the crash site still burned against the darkness. John made a decision. You're not going anywhere. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Because if that thing finds you in the canyons, it'll still do its scan, he said. If you're going to run, we need to make sure it can't report what it finds. You can't destroy a harvester, she said. Not with what you have here. John's jaw set. Then we'll have to get creative. They worked through the night. Larea dismantled one of the older farming drones. Stripping out its core components, these can overload, she said. If we feed too much power into them, they will burn hot enough to melt armor. John pulled out crates of old fuel cells, the kind banned by colony law for being unstable. These burn too, if you hit them right, he said. Larea glanced at him, and for the first time, a flicker of respect crossed her face. Perhaps. We can hurt it. The children stayed close but silent, watching as the two of them worked in near darkness. The faint blue glow of Larea's skin lit the tools in her hands. By midnight, the traps were ready. 3 modified drones hidden in the field, each wired to detonate on command. John checked the horizon, but the valley was quiet. The crash site still burned, but no movement showed in the distance. Will it come at night? He asked. No, Larea said. It waits until its prey sleeps. Then it comes at dawn when we are slow. John nodded. Then we'll be waiting for it. She looked at him, her voice low. If this fails, you must run. Do not try to fight. It's not really my style, John replied. As the hours passed, the silence grew heavier. Every creak of the barn felt louder, every rustle in the crops sharper. John sat on the porch with his old plasma cutter across his knees. Larea sat nearby, her children asleep against her sides in the distance, far beyond the burning wreck. A faint red light blinked in the sky. It was moving slow, steady, and coming closer. John didn't need her to tell him what it was. The harvester was on its way. The first light of dawn spilled across the fields. John Marlowe stood at the far fence line, eyes fixed on the horizon. The faint red light from the night before was gone, but the silence was heavier now. Behind him, Larea was bent over the old farming drone they had rigged into a trap. Her long fingers moved quickly. Checking the wiring one last time, the children sat nearby, wrapped in blankets, watching everything without a word. John's mind was already running through the plan. Again, but the same question kept gnawing at him. He finally turned to her. You still haven't told me why they want you so bad. Larea didn't look up. 'Cause I am not supposed to be here. That's not much of an answer, John said. Lots of folks aren't supposed to be here. This time, she stopped. Working, her 4 eyes met his. You think I am only running from humans? Am I wrong? Yes, she said simply, then glanced toward the sleeping children. I am running from my own kind too. John frowned. Why would your own? People hunt you. She hesitated for a long moment, as if measuring how much she should say. Then she stood, wiping dust from her hands. You have heard of the frontier wars. Everyone has, John replied. We fought them for years. We won. Larea tilted her head slightly. You think victory is so simple? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. When the war ended, your side cut off the supply routes to my people's homeworld. The soil was poisoned from years of battles. The crops failed, the air turned sharp. Our leaders told us the famine was the price of losing. John felt an uneasy twist in his gut. He'd heard stories of their worlds being in bad shape, but not like that. So you came here for food, he said. Not just for me, she replied. I worked on the harvester fleets, the ships that collect food from occupied worlds, some of them human. John's jaw tightened. You were part of the same machines that stripped our colonies bare." Her voice was calm, but heavy. "Yes. But I learned something the others did not. The harvesters do not just take crops, they take people. Both ours and yours, to work in the deep farms, they never return." John felt a cold anger rising. "You're telling me my own people are out there on your worlds?" "Yes," she said, "and many of my people are still here, hidden, working. In your colonies for scraps." He took a step toward her and the kids. "They are not all mine," Larea admitted. "Some are orphans from my side. Some are human. Their parents were taken and no one came back for them." John looked at the smallest child. Curled up under the blanket, he had been too thin. Too quiet now, John wondered if he had ever heard a word of human language in his life. "You took them," John said, "and ran. I stole a harvester's access codes," she said, "used them to open holding bays. I freed as many as I could, but the fleet saw it as treason. Now I am a target to them. And a suspect to you." John rubbed his face, trying to process it all. "You could have just kept running." She shook her head. "Running doesn't feed them, and hiding only works for so long. I came here because your worlds still grow food. I thought maybe someone would trade work for it." John thought of the patrol yesterday, the way the soldiers' eyes had lingered on the barn. The noose was already tightening. "If this drone gets close, it'll find more than you." He said. "Yes," Larea said. "It will send everything it sees to my people, and when they come, they will burn this farm to the ground." John glanced toward the horizon again. "Then we better make sure it never sends anything." They worked without speaking much after that. John could feel the weight of her words sitting in his chest. She wasn't just a refugee, she was a fugitive to two sides of a war that still hadn't ended for her. By midday, the children were hidden deep inside the storage shed. Larea had checked every wire and fuse in their traps twice. John tightened the last bolts on the old harvester. "Rigged with fuel cells, you ever killed one of these before?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I have seen them die." "How?" "They trust their armor," she said. "They do not expect the ground to fight back." John allowed himself a grim smile. "Then we'll make the ground bite hard." As the day faded toward evening, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint mechanical hum. Larea's head snapped toward the sound. "It's here," she said. John gripped the trigger control for the first trap. His heart was steady now. No more guessing, no more questions. The truth was out and the danger was real. Somewhere beyond the far ridge, the harvester drone rose into view. Black against the orange sky, its wings gleamed with dull metal. Its sensors glowing like cold eyes. "It knows we're here," Larea said, "but it doesn't know we're ready." The harvester drone moved like a predator. Its black frame shimmered against the evening light. Each slow sweep of its wings sending a low metallic thrum through the air. It wasn't in a hurry. It didn't need to be. It already knew its prey was here. John Marlowe crouched behind a stack of hay bales, his thumb resting on the detonator for the first trap. Across the field, Larea lay low behind the old harvester they had wired with unstable fuel cells. Her 4 eyes were locked on the drone, watching for its pattern. The children were hidden deep underground in the grain storage, surrounded by sacks of feed. John had told them not to make a sound, not to move until someone came for them. Or until they heard nothing at all. The drone glided over the far ridge, its sensors flashing in faint blue arcs, scanning the land below. A beam of light swept across the ground, sizzling faintly as it passed over the crops. Its mapping. The field. Larea's voice crackled over the small comm in John's ear. "Wait for it to come closer." John's grip on the detonator tightened. His pulse pounded in his ears, but his breathing stayed even. The drone banked left, drifting toward the center of the property. Its scanning beam passed over the barn. John's stomach tightened, but the machine didn't pause. It was heading For the largest open patch of field exactly where the first trap waited. Almost, Larea whispered. Almost. The moment the drone crossed over the buried charge, John slammed the button. A deafening crack split the air. The ground erupted in a burst of flame and soil, shoving the drone sideways. Its sensors flared red, and it let out a piercing mechanical screech. You got its attention. Larea said, already on the move. She dashed from cover. Sprinting toward the harvester rig, the drone spun in midair, recovering fast. Its wings unfolded wider, revealing two mounted cannons that began to hum with lethal energy. John ducked. Behind the bales as a bolt of searing plasma ripped past, vaporizing the top layer of hay. The smell of burning straw filled the air. Second trap. Larea shouted. John rolled to his left, hitting the second detonator. Another blast tore through the drone's lower wing, sending shards of metal into the dirt. The machine wobbled, struggling to stabilize. That's it. Keep hitting it. Larea's voice was sharp, focused, but the drone was angry now. Its cannons spat rapid bursts toward the source of the explosions, forcing John to dive into a shallow trench. Dirt rained down over him. Third trap, you ready? Larea's voice came through again. John risked a glance. The drone was coming low now. Maybe 20 feet off the ground, scanning furiously. Its sensors locked on Larea. She didn't run. Instead, she stood in full view. Hands on the old harvester's control rig. Now, Marlowe. She shouted. John hit the last trigger. The field erupted in a roar as the harvester's modified core went critical. A column of fire shot upward. Swallowing the drone in blinding light, the shockwave knocked John flat, heat slamming into his back. The smell of scorched metal and earth filled the air. When the dust settled, the drone lay twisted in the center of the field. Smoke curling from its shattered frame. Its sensors flickered once, twice, and then went dark. John pulled himself up, ears ringing. He staggered toward Larea, who was already at the wreck, prying open its control core with her bare hands. Tell me that thing's dead, he said, his voice hoarse. It's dead, she replied, but it was sending data before we hit it. John's chest went tight. You mean she ripped the core free, slammed it into the dirt, and crushed it under her boot? Sparks hissed out. Not anymore, she said. Breathing hard, for a long moment, they just stood there, the field burning in small patches around them. Then Larea turned toward the barn, her voice soft. The children? They hurried to the grain storage, pulling back the heavy sacks. The two small forms blinked up at them in the dim light. Safe but silent, Larea gathered them close. Her shoulders shaking with relief, John watched for a moment before speaking. This farm's not safe for you anymore, I know, she said. But you've given us more time than we had. He nodded slowly. Where will you go? Somewhere they won't look right away, she said. And somewhere the patrols can't follow. John went back to the barn, gathering a small bundle of food and water. He didn't say it, but he knew this might be the last time he saw them. As the first light of dawn crept over the scorched field, Larea stood at the edge of the property, the children at her side. She looked back once, meeting John's gaze. Thank you, she said simply. He gave a short nod. Take care of them. And then they were gone, disappearing into the morning mist. John turned back toward his land. The fields were damaged, but the irrigation still flowed strong. The air smelled of smoke and fresh soil. He knew trouble would come again someday. But for now, the farm was quiet, somewhere far away. An alien mother was still running, and John Marlowe had a feeling he hadn't seen the last of her.